I'm catching late flight, don't wait up. That's what he texted me at 7:43 on a Tuesday night, and I almost believed him. I almost put my phone down, poured myself a glass of wine, and went to bed like I had done 100 times before. Almost. But I was sitting in the parking garage at Boston Bergstrom International Airport at that exact moment. Gate C, Level 2. Waiting for him to walk out so I could surprise him with dinner reservations for our anniversary. 7 years, next Thursday. I had the confirmation in my email. Uchiko, 8 p.m., table for 2 by the window. I had even worn the green dress he said he liked. He never came through those doors. I waited 40 minutes. I watched every flight from Chicago land. I watched businessmen in rumpled suits drag their rollerboards past me, couples reuniting at baggage claim, a little girl running toward a man who had to be her grandfather. I watched all of it, and I did not see my husband. So I called him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, just landed," he said. "Baggage claim's a mess. I'll probably be another hour." I said okay. I said drive safe. I hung up. Then I sat there in that parking garage for a long time, very still, listening to the sound of my own breathing. He had not landed. He was not in baggage claim. I just watched every single person walk through those doors, and he was not one of them. I want to tell you that I cried, that I called my best friend in a panic, that I fell apart right there between the concrete pillars and the fluorescent lights. But I didn't. What I actually felt, and I remember this clearly, was a strange, slow calm. Like something that had been vibrating at a frequency just below hearing had finally gone quiet. I drove home. I made a pot of tea. I sat at the kitchen table and I thought about what I actually knew versus what I had assumed for the last 2 years. My name is Iris. I'm 31 years old. I have a master's degree in forensic accounting, which I have spent the last 6 years using to audit mid-sized companies for financial fraud. I find things people try to hide. It is, professionally speaking, what I am very good at. My husband's name is Connor. He's 35. He's a regional sales director for a medical device company, which means he travels, genuinely, legitimately travels, roughly 8 to 10 days a month. So when he started staying away longer, I attributed it to Q4 pressure. When the texts got shorter, I told myself he was tired. When he stopped reaching for me at night, I told myself marriages go through phases and that we were just in one. I was very good at explaining things away. What I could not explain away was the parking garage. After that night, I stopped explaining. I started looking. I didn't go through his phone. Not at first. I started where I always start with a new case, financials. We had a joint checking account and 2 individual accounts we'd kept from before we were married. That was the agreement. Transparent on the joint, independent on the personal. I had never thought twice about it. I thought twice about it now. I couldn't access his personal account directly, but I could see our joint one, and when I went back 6 months, really looked the way I look at a client's books, I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before because I hadn't been looking for them. Gas charges in neighborhoods where he had no reason to be. A restaurant charge on a night he'd told me he was at a work dinner. I happened to know that dinner had been canceled because his colleague, who was also my friend, had texted me that week complaining about it. A charge at a florist on our anniversary last year. I had not received flowers. None of it was definitive. All of it was directional. I kept a spreadsheet. I know how that sounds. But it's what I do. I document. I build a picture. I look for patterns. And the pattern I was building was not a good one. 3 weeks after the airport, on a Friday afternoon, Connor texted me to say he had a client dinner in Dallas. He'd be back Sunday. I looked at his work calendar. We shared it for scheduling purposes, and there was no Dallas trip on it. I called my sister that afternoon, not to tell her everything, just to hear a voice I trusted while I figured out what to do next. "You sound weird," she said. "I'm fine," I said. "Iris, I think something's wrong," I said. "With my marriage?" She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "What do you need?" That's my sister. She doesn't catastrophize. She doesn't pepper you with questions. She just asks what you need. What I needed, I told her, was to think. She said, "Okay." She said, "Call me anytime." She said she loved me. We hung up. I booked a flight to Dallas. Not to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't ready for that, and I also knew from years of professional experience that confronting someone before you have your documentation in order is how you lose the upper hand entirely. I booked the flight because I needed to know what I was dealing with. I needed to see it. I found him at the hotel bar. He was not alone. She was younger than me, by maybe 5 years, with dark hair and a way of leaning toward him when she talked that made my stomach turn in a way I still can't fully describe. Not because it was passionate, because it was comfortable. That's what got me. It looked like a habit. It looked practiced. It looked like something that had been going on long enough that they had developed their own small rhythms, their own shorthand. He had his hand on the back of her chair. I stood near the entrance of the lobby for probably 4 minutes, just watching. I had my sunglasses on even though we were indoors, which was not a subtle move, but neither of them looked my way. Then I left. I went to my own hotel. I had booked one across the street, which felt both paranoid and necessary at the time. And I sat on the bed and I finally let myself feel it. All of it. The 2 years of small explanations I'd made for him, the nights I convinced myself I was being paranoid, the anniversary dinner I'd planned that he had blown off with a text from an airport he was never in. I cried for a long time. Ugly, full-body crying. The kind where you stop being able to distinguish between grief and rage and exhaustion because they're all the same thing in that moment. Then I washed my face, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. I had work to do. When I got home Sunday evening, before him, because his story had him returning late, I called a friend from law school who had gone into family law. Her name is Audrey. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, but she picked up immediately when she saw my name, because that's the kind of friendship that survives long stretches of silence. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is a skill most people do not have. When I finished, she said, "Okay, first thing, don't confront him yet." I know. Seriously, Iris. Not until we know exactly what you're entitled to and what documentation you need to protect yourself. I know. I said again. That's why I'm calling you. She referred me to a divorce attorney in Austin, someone she'd worked with, someone she trusted. I had an appointment by Tuesday morning. The attorney's name was Sandra, different Sandra from the names I needed to avoid, I noted with grim humor. No, wait, I'll call her my attorney. She was precise, unhurried, and she asked questions that made me feel for the first time in weeks like I was in capable hands. The first thing she told me was to document everything but not to move any money or change any accounts. Don't tip him off, she said. Let him think everything is normal for now. The second thing she told me was to get a forensic accountant to look at his personal accounts. Formally, through discovery if it came to that, or informally if I could gather enough preliminary information to know what we were looking for. I told her I was a forensic accountant. She paused. Then she smiled, just slightly for the first time since we'd sat down. Well, she said, that changes things a little. It did. What I found over the next 3 weeks, using publicly available records, his shared calendar, credit card statements from our joint account, and a few other things I am choosing not to describe in detail, was this. My husband had been paying rent on an apartment in South Austin for at least 14 months. The lease was not in his name. It was in the name of an LLC he had registered in Delaware 18 months ago. The LLC had no obvious business purpose. It held the apartment lease and, as best I could determine, not much else. He had paid for this with his personal account, which I could not directly access. But forensic accounting is about building a picture, and the picture I was building was very, very clear. He was not just having an affair. He had constructed infrastructure for it, an LLC, a separate address, a financial system designed to be invisible to me. I sat with that for a long time. There's a version of this story where I scream at him, where I throw things, where I call him from the parking lot of that Dallas hotel and make a scene. I understand why people want that version. I understand why the comments on videos like this one say things like, I would have destroyed him. I get it. I felt it. But here's what I know from my work. Emotion is the enemy of outcome. The people who blow up the moment they find out, they often end up with less. Less documentation, less leverage, less protection. Because the other person now knows what you know and has time to move things around. I did not want less. I wanted everything I was entitled to, and I wanted him to have no warning. I kept going to work. I kept making dinner. I kept asking how his day was. I kept sleeping next to a man I had already, in every way that mattered, left. I will not pretend that was easy. There were nights I lay there in the dark, with my heart hammering and my jaw clenched so hard I woke up with headaches. There were mornings I stood in the shower and had to remind myself, out loud, why I was still doing this. Why the timeline mattered. My attorney told me it was time, 8 weeks after my first appointment with her, to move forward. On a Thursday morning in March, I went to our bank and opened a new individual account. I transferred my direct deposit. I documented the transfer, notified my attorney, and did everything correctly and above board. Because I was not hiding anything, I was protecting myself. Then I called my sister and told her everything. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I'm coming over." "You don't have to. I'm coming over," she said. "I'll bring food." She brought Thai food and a bottle of wine, and she sat across from me at my kitchen table for 4 hours while I talked, and she listened and occasionally said things that made me feel less alone than I had felt in a very long time. At some point she asked me if I still loved him. I thought about it honestly. I loved the person I thought he was. I said, "I don't think that person was ever fully real." She nodded. She poured more wine. She said, "You're going to be okay, you know." I did know. But it mattered to hear someone else say it. Connor was served the following Monday. He had just walked into his office building downtown. I know because my attorney had timed it deliberately in a semi-public setting during business hours. Professional. Controlled. He called me 11 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that one go too. The third time, I picked up. "What is this?" he said. His voice was strange, tight in a way I hadn't heard before. "Divorce papers," I said. "Iris, you don't have to say anything right now," I said. "Your attorney will be in touch with mine. Can we please talk about this? I can explain." And there it was. I can explain. The 2 words that explain nothing. The 2 words that are always the beginning of a sentence that, when you listen to it, contains no actual information whatsoever. I can explain, followed by it didn't mean anything, followed by it was a mistake, followed by I didn't mean for it to happen, as though things of this scope and this duration just happen to people like weather. "There's nothing to explain," I said. "I know about Dallas. I know about the apartment. I know about the LLC. Silence. Not the silence of someone thinking about what to say. The silence of someone who has just realized they have already lost. I have an attorney," I said. "You should get one too." And I hung up. I put my phone face down on the counter, then I stood very still in my kitchen for a moment, listening. To the refrigerator humming. To a car passing outside. To the specific, particular quiet of a house where I was alone and had been, in some real sense, alone for a long time, but where now the aloneness felt chosen. The divorce took 7 months. Texas is a community property state, which meant that even though the affair was not, legally, grounds for unequal division in most circumstances, the financial forensics mattered. My attorney and I documented the funds that had flowed through his LLC, the rent payments, the expenses that had been marital assets directed toward a secret life. It wasn't a perfect legal instrument. Nothing in divorce ever is, but it was something. We reached a settlement without going to trial. I will not disclose the specifics, but I will say that I left that marriage in a significantly better financial position than I would have if I had confronted him in the parking lot of that Dallas hotel the way part of me wanted to. Patience, in this case, was not passivity. It was strategy. There's one more thing I want to tell you. About 4 months after everything was finalized, I ran into a woman at a coffee shop near my office. It took me a moment to place her. She was in line ahead of me, ordering a drip coffee, and then she turned around and I recognized her immediately. The woman from the hotel bar. Dark hair. The way she'd leaned toward him. She recognized me at the same moment I recognized her. I know because I watched the color shift in her face. We were standing maybe 3 feet apart. I thought about all the things I could say, all the things I had rehearsed in my head at 3 in the morning during those 8 weeks I was waiting, all the versions of this confrontation I had imagined. I didn't say any of them. What I actually said was nothing. I just looked at her for a moment. Not with anger, or at least not only with anger. And then I collected my coffee and I walked out. Because here's the thing I came to understand. In all of those months, I had spent 2 years making excuses for a man who had made a choice. Every late flight, every missed anniversary, every night he was somewhere I didn't know. Those were choices. He chose, repeatedly and deliberately, to build a life that excluded me while using my presence as cover. That wasn't something that happened to him. That wasn't a mistake. That was a decision he made, over and over. And I cannot spend whatever energy I have left being angry at every person who was part of that decision. I needed that energy for other things. I'm 31 years old. I have a good job I'm good at. I have a sister who brings Thai food at short notice, and a best friend who makes me laugh until my face hurts, and an apartment in East Austin with big windows and a kitchen I actually cook in now, which I never really did when I was married, because cooking for someone who might not come home felt like a setup. Last week, I made pasta from scratch for the first time. It took way longer than the box says it should. It was imperfect and irregular and genuinely delicious, and I ate it alone at my own table with a glass of wine and a book I'd been meaning to read for 2 years. It was one of the better evenings I've had in a long time. He thought he was managing me. He thought he'd built something invisible. He thought I would keep explaining things away, because I had, for long enough that it seemed like a permanent condition. What he didn't know was that the same part of me that spent 6 years finding what people try to hide was also, eventually, going to turn that attention toward my own life. He didn't know that until it was too late to matter, and now the people who need to know it, know it. That's enough. I've thought a lot about what actually saved me in all of this, and it wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It was the fact that at some point, sitting alone in that parking garage at the airport, watching strangers reunite while my husband texted me lies from somewhere else entirely, I made a decision to stop being soft with myself about what I already knew. That's the part nobody talks about. Not the betrayal itself, but the long stretch of time before it when you already know something is wrong and you choose over and over to look away. I did that. For almost 2 years, I made myself smaller explanations so I wouldn't have to face a larger truth. And I don't say that to be hard on myself. I say it because I think most people do the same thing. And I think it matters to name it, honestly. Connor didn't build a secret life overnight. He built it slowly, in the margins, counting on the fact that I trusted him. And the thing about trust is that it can become a kind of willful blindness if you're not careful. You stop checking because checking feels like an accusation. You stop asking because asking feels like distrust. And in that silence and that space you leave open out of love or out of fear or out of both, someone else can build something you never consented to. What I learned, and I mean really learned, not in a motivational poster way, but in my body, in the specific tiredness of those 8 weeks I spent waiting, is that intelligence without honesty is just a tool you're pointing in the wrong direction. I spent 6 years finding what other people tried to hide, and I spent 2 years refusing to turn that same attention toward my own front door. That mismatch cost me. Not everything, but enough. The part that stays with me most isn't the hotel bar in Dallas, or the LLC, or even the phone call when he tried to say, "I can't explain." It's the night my sister sat across from me at my kitchen table and asked if I still loved him, and I had to actually think about it, because the honest answer was that I had loved a version of him that had required a lot of my own imagination to sustain. That's not love, that's authorship. You can't build a real life on a character you wrote yourself. What I know now, on the other side of all of it, is this. The choices you make when things are hard are the ones that define what comes next. Not dramatically, not in one big moment, just quietly, one decision at a time. I could have confronted him in that parking lot in Dallas and blown everything up and walked away with less. I chose differently. I chose to be patient when patience felt unbearable, to be precise when I wanted to be loud, to protect myself first so I could actually move forward instead of just escaping. That discipline, that decision to stay clear-headed when everything in you wants to fall apart, is not something that comes from nowhere. It's built. It's a choice you make before the crisis, in the smaller moments. When you practice being honest with yourself about what you see and what you feel and what you actually want your life to look like. Iris made that choice. In a parking garage, alone, with a dinner reservation she'd never use, and it was the most important choice she ever made.